Jay. Welcome to Mvskoke Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar. It's Jay Stongo, Gary Fife, Jawajif Gedos, Mvskoke Radio, Mabo Edged Wedge. Welcome to our program. And we hope that you're off to a good start for the 2023 12-month segment coming up. We will be trying to get out a lot of new stuff this year, and we've got a couple things that might be real useful right now, and then we're going to take a look at some of the big stories that Mvskoke media has covered over the past year. But first of all, we want to welcome to our studio Kathy Taylor and Alicia Grafman. They are career specialists with employment and training. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, let me turn your mic on. That might help. Now, first of all, for folks who aren't familiar with your program, what do you do? I mean, everyone has their little niche and responsibilities and your mission. So let's start there. Kathy, you lead off there?
Okay. As a career specialist, what we do is meet with our clients or for anyone that is returning to school. And we try to see what kind of grants that they can apply for so that they can help with assistance if they don't have any financial aid or anything. Mm-hmm. They can apply for our classroom training and the tribal grant. And the classroom training is one of the things that we're here to talk about. It is the spring semester, so our deadline for that is January the 5th. And we just want to welcome any new students that would be attending any vocational or technical schools to apply for our program so that they can receive assistance. And
now, I understand that the cost of an education is getting out of hand. I mean, really, really expensive. So the assistance and support that your program provides is critical at this point.
Yes. Our biweekly allowance actually went up from 120 to 180, so that's going to help the students a lot whenever they attend school.
Now this is cash. I mean,
yes,
money.
It's a check that will go directly to them, and they can use it for whatever they need.
Okay, the amounts I presume are variable. Are there any limits as to what a student can use this material for? This money?
On the biweekly stipend, that is whatever they need that for, educational expenses as far as if they need it for gas, food, anything that they need it for.
Yeah, supplies,
just to get them.
Coat, yeah.
Yes, sir.
And anything beyond that is not really allowed.
Well, we don't require receipts.
Okay.
So what they do with it, we would want them to use it wisely.
Right, yeah, okay, don't go out and party with it. I presume they could. You don't kind of follow them around. Now, where does this money come from? What sort of basis, I guess? Is this federal bucks? Is it tribal? Where does it come from?
We have tribal funds, and we also have federal funds, because with our classroom training program, we can also help other federally recognized tribes, which income guidelines do apply for other tribes. So there are certain requirements that they have to meet.
But first of all, if someone from another federally recognized tribe was asking for help, then you would be able to support them or include them.
If they meet the requirements of the program.
Now, let's probably take a real good look at those requirements. Now, what do you need to be or do to qualify for this support?
They have to reside within the Mvskoke Creek Nation Reservation. They have to have a high school diploma or a GED. They must be registered with a federally recognized tribe. And for non-Mvskoke citizens, they do have to meet income guidelines.
Just as what if, suppose you have someone, say, from the White Earth Reservation in Minnesota, they're Ojibwe, and on the surface they would qualify for this kind of help, but what sort of income caps are we talking about here?
We go by the federal poverty guidelines. So
I know that I would qualify for that one, but do you have a figure? Does something come to mind?
I don't think they have released the 2023 poverty guidelines yet. It usually they usually release those about the middle of January, so.
Okay, so there's still more information to come.
Uh-huh.
All right, well, let's talk about the kind of training that are eligible, or the schools that perhaps people could attend.
Okay. One of the trainings that we have for the classroom training would be the natural gas and the...
When we say natural gas, we talking about teaching people to work, say, on a pipeline or something, some sort of gas installation.
Yes. And, well, let me get back to the approved institutions that we do help with. That would be the OSUIT campus.
Here in Okmulgee, right?
Yes. And any of the career tech centers within our reservation, which would be Central Tech, Green Country, Gordon Cooper, Indian Capital, Kaimishi, Tulsa Tech, and West Watkins. And whenever they do applications for us, we usually check and see if they are going, full-time or part-time, and that's how we'll determine how we're able to assist most of our clients.
Right. Another example, perhaps, I took some computer classes at Central
Tech.
in Sapulpa, right, and I was really pleased with that. And so, as a student in that program, then I would have qualified, perhaps, if I'd have met some of the others guidelines.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm glad I did, because I had been using a computer but didn't know what I was doing. Kind of faking it there. All right, now, natural gas is a wonderful subject, of course, with the demand for energy increasing across the nation, and politicians saying, Oklahoma's an energy state, da-da-da. We've heard all of that. What else is there that is kind of a hot career field that you might point people to?
Anything in the health career and CDL. Those are the...
CDL is what?
Yeah. It is commercial driving. So if you want to take, if you need to get your CDL, we can... Central Tech is one of the schools where most of our clients go, because they have satellite offices at West Watkins and Green Country, and they have a lot of students that are going through the program, and once they do complete, they usually have like sponsors that go out, and they'll have a one-on-one with the students so that they can get a job once they've completed their training.
Now, when I hear CDL, first thing comes to mind is a truck driver. You got to have one of those to handle one of these 18-wheelers. So they could qualify for training there, perhaps an ambulance driver or a taxi cab person or a bus driver?
Correct.
Okay, so all of those would fit in. And with our transportation hubs being all fouled up, I would presume a truck driver's job is
It's in high demand.
Do you have any idea, any figures or some feel for it, perhaps?
They only their class size is limited, so there is a waiting list at Central Tech. I know their classes are booked up through,
February.
well, through April right now. Students do drop out and everything like that happens.
Sure, yeah.
So, because we have been getting applications as far out as their start date being for April.
Wow.
Yes. So if they apply for the classroom training program and then they apply for our tribal grant program, and then there's also a extracurricular grant through the education and training department that they can apply for. And with those 3 grants, those 3 programs, they can have their tuition paid for if they're eligible.
Right, and those tuitions aren't cheap.
No, sir.
Okay.
But Central Tech has, from what we've seen, Central Tech's is probably the best rated.
Okay, well, I had a good experience there with those folks there. Yeah, as the people complete their educational disciplines there, then what's the job markets looking like? I mean, are they going to be able to get a job or employment fairly quickly? Do they stay in Oklahoma, or do they go out of state? I mean, do you have some feel for that? If you got specific numbers, that's wonderful, but you just got a feel for it, an idea maybe.
As far as the CDL goes, that can be in-state, out-of-state, all over. Then our natural gas, the same way. I mean, they get jobs all over.
Right. Now, of course, Oklahoma is well known for its oil and gas industries there, so I would guess that there are a lot of opportunities here.
Yeah, most of them get their jobs like whenever they start their internships.
So in Oklahoma, they want to stay close to home or their families. The adventurous types jump in a truck and head for Connecticut. Okay, now as we have been curious, like what sort of response do you now get from people who are interested now? Yeah, Alicia, you mentioned a 4-month waiting period for some of these things. That sounds like these are really popular opportunities.
Yes, that's just for the CDL. Of course, when everything got shut down, as far as the transportation and everything, we saw a rise in CDL students applying, and a lot of career changes within students.
Right. People started off on one career path and then figured out it is not for me, and let's find something else.
Yes.
Correct. There's a lot of our numbers as far as our students is starting to come back up. We're starting to see our numbers back to pre-COVID numbers.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So that's really, really great. So that's how come we're trying to get the word back out on our classroom training and everything so we can keep our numbers up.
Are most of Mvskoke citizens? Or would you know?
On our full-time.
Yeah.
As far as our full-time goes, yes. For our part-time, it's probably 50-50.
Okay, speaking of divisions there, and I don't know if you may have this information at hand, but is there a breakdown of male versus female, perhaps? If you don't know, that's fine, but if you see more women students, I'm just curious here.
Whenever they were going back into the work field, I think we did see a little bit more women apply for the CDL license.
Really?
Yes.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
I remember we had a very small woman on the show. Was it last year? She was a truck driver and drove one of those dual trailer rigs. And always got a lot of surprised look from some of these good old boys when she pulled into the truck stop. This little woman jumps out of this huge rig. So size and education, that sort of thing, doesn't matter if you've got the interest and the determination.
Right.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if, sometimes there's a setback. Maybe they've already done the classroom training before, and if we're not able to assist somebody, whether it's because of the income guidelines or, they just have to complete a class on their own, then, we give them resources.
Mm-hmm.
Other than our department. We usually refer them out to the Workforce Oklahoma, because they have the same programs as we do, and it's vice versa. We work together. If we have any of our citizens that go over there, they'll recommend them to our department first before they get assistance.
Yeah. I always like to ask questions like the flip side of the coin kind of thing. What might prevent someone from being accepted or perhaps disqualified and removed from your program?
For starters, if they've utilized all of their funding with us. For our full-time classroom training, you're allowed 6 full-time semesters on the program. For our part-time, you get up to 4 part-time classes, or the equivalent of $3,300.
Mm-hmm.
So, take for instance the truck driving, the CDL, that utilizes all 4 part-time classes, because it's not you're not eligible for financial aid, so it's considered a part-time class.
Okay. How about perhaps any personal problems that someone might have, like driving record that isn't quite so clean, or perhaps some other maybe criminal problems that they've had, or that sort of thing? Would that ever affect their application or their participation in the program?
Not with our applications, but it would probably affect, like, whenever they enroll at school,
Mm-hmm.
because they will do a background.
Yeah, I was going to ask the background check.
Yeah, depending on what program they are going to be attending. I know some of the schools, especially in the health, they have to do background checks for some of their required programs. CDL they do. So it varies
Mm-hmm.
on what kind of program you're going into and everything like that. So another thing that could probably disqualify them would be if we've assisted them and they had an incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
So that means they'd have to go without ETA assistance.
Mm-hmm.
Do a class or a semester on their own.
Right. Yeah, you gotta stick with it and show your dedication to what you're trying to achieve there. So if they're kind of playing with it, and I know some people, I'll get on this program and I'll get a couple of paychecks and then I'm gone. So if
We see it all the time.
Oh, really? Yeah. I was going to say it's one of the curses I think our people have to live with. As you go through a year, there will be several opportunities, is it, or deadlines or semesters, breakdowns in fall, spring, and summer where you might accept new students? How does that work?
So for the fall semester, we have July 20th through September the 5th. Spring semester, we start taking applications November 20th to January 5th. So our application deadline is tomorrow. As long as you get your application in, you're good. And then we'll just, update or follow up with an email and ask for our required documents that we need. And then we have the summer, which is March 20th through May 5th. And those are for the full-time programs.
Is it attached to any seasonal opportunities? Like in the summertime, you're going to be out and about. Fall, you're getting ready for cold weather and nasty roads. I mean, is it attached somehow like that?
It's whenever you start your classes.
Okay.
Yeah, some of our career tech centers, they're not set up, their programs aren't set up in normal semesters, you could say, depending on what program they're actually enrolled in. Take, for instance, that like LPN programs at Green Country Technology, they start in July, like the second week of July. And then they start in January because they are a 11-month program, 11 or 13-month program.
Yeah, that's not easy. Before we get too far away from that, now, it's been my experience kind of in dealing with this topic is that many women are quite interested in health careers. And so can you give me some idea of some of the jobs then that are available that they might be able to achieve at some point?
Within the Mvskoke Nation Health, there's many career opportunities within the reservation at our hospitals and clinics and everything.
Well, I would presume that would be an RN, what is it, a registered nurse?
Yes.
LPN, licensed practical nurse. And
Yes,
then
sir.
Physician's assistant.
But we've mainly had a lot of CMA, CNAs.
Phlebotomist.
What is CNA?
CNA is a certified nurse's aide,
Okay.
and then CMA is certified medication aide.
Now, what are these positions designed to do?
Most of them are nursing home.
Okay.
They can work in physical therapy, rehab centers. They can also work in the clinics. We get some for the medical records,
Right. Coding and things like that.
medical billing and coding.
Yeah.
So
And then they just use that as a stepping stone to go from the CMA, CNA to LPN, and then if they want to go further to the nursing.
Yeah. Yeah, my brother is an RN, or was at least until he retired. And he told me there's quite a stair step to achieving and getting promotions. And once you get in and get started, it is quite a lucrative career. But there, I guess, is a downside of having to perhaps work in an emergency room when you. Anyway, he told me some kind of gruesome stories that we won't get into in this program. Now, if you were to recruit someone who was just kind of trying to figure out what they wanted to do or be or which direction, what would you tell them? How would you discuss this subject with them?
Sometimes we have clients that come in that don't know what they want to do, but they know they want to go to school. So we ask them to do a career assessment for us, and then we'll just see where their highest career cluster is. But usually we just talk with them to see what they're interested in, and we try to push them into the right direction, what schools are available, where they can, who they need to talk to, because we're just only there to help with, classroom training, tribal grants.
Right. I would presume then a lot of these opportunities are what we used to call vocational kind of thing. Mechanic, AC, whatever else, as you say, natural gas, things like that. And not necessarily a academic kind of direction. Well, now I tell you what, we're going to wind it down here. Now, let's run over the deadlines again that will be coming up from the year, and then how do people get in touch with you, and what should they bring into the office when they want to apply?
So for the spring semester, which most of our career techs started yesterday, back to school, the deadline to apply for the full-time is tomorrow, January 5th. If they happen to miss that deadline, they can apply for the summer semester, which is March 20th through May 5th. And if they happen to start for the fall semester, which is usually August, September, they want to apply July 20th through September 5th.
Okay, so if you're real anxious to get in, tomorrow's the deadline. Get
Correct.
off your backside and get that sucker toned in.
Correct.
Okay. Now, if someone was curious and wanted to get more information about the program and opportunities, how would they get in touch with you all?
They just call our main number, which is 918-732-7773.
Okay, is there anything else that we might want to mention and share with our listeners?
Before they come into the office, I would recommend them calling. That way that we can send them the application link by email if they're able to complete the applications online, if they have access to a desktop or a laptop computer. We can email the application link to them. That way they can go ahead and submit their applications, and we're able to do intake on their applications, and by the time they get their email with the required documents, they know what they need to bring into the office.
Okay, great. That phone number one more time.
918-732-7773.
All right, Kathy Taylor and Alicia Grafman, please, thank you so much for coming in and saving my tail at the last moment. We appreciate the information you've got, and hopefully
You're welcome.
you'll get a lot of applications.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to take a short pause here, and then we'll be back with some of our people from Mvskoke Media to talk about what our department has done over the past year in terms of coverage of stories and video, radio, and our newspapers. So please stay with us here on Mvskoke Radio on The Brew. Welcome back to Mvskoke Radio here on The Brew. Welcoming some of our crew in here for a change. Actually, they've been in here a lot lately. Our director here, Angel Ellis, and let's see, what is your specific title, Jared?
Assignment editor, that's my new title. So.
Okay, but he's the video guy.
Yeah, nothing's changed really.
Yeah, you have to shift titles occasionally. We better be quiet or HR will hear that.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Okay, well, we just got into a brand new year. We made it through the last one. My God, that was a...
2022 was a grind, that's for sure. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, it was a real butt kicker in some cases. Many of the huge stories and topics that our tribe has to deal with were dealt with at the Supreme Court level. We got into a knockdown, drag out with our governor here. Of course, McGirt and cost deputizations are always going to figure in. Healthcare, COVID. How do we deal with Tulsa? I understand we're going to build a new dam now. The Friedman issue.
Yeah, there's just been a lot of, I'm always surprised by our audience engagement. Like, you often look at what's doing well on your platforms in terms of news, and we take that as a cue of what our audience really likes to hear. And our audience is extremely diverse. Like, they run the gamut between maybe they like some soft news features about citizens who are doing good things out in the world, and then they also like to hear those hard news pieces about the Supreme Court cases, and they love to know what's going on at that federal level. And that's real challenging for a small news staff. But what we found out in 2022 is that while we have a small staff, we have like a really diversely interested staff too. Like, I think that if you look at our staff, it ranges from age and gender and things like that. So you get multiple perspectives. And I was really pleased when I was looking at I was looking for the top 10 news stories of 2022, and every one of our reporters kind of had something in there. So,
Right, yeah.
and they're a young crew of reporters, but they're out there like really dedicated and listening to the feedback of their audience. And so each one of them had something in that top 10 list. And Jared did the top 10 for the YouTube channel, and I was also surprised that some of the things that made the top 10 list on YouTube also made the top 10 most read, written news stories too.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of intersection between those audiences.
And we had the same diversity too, as far as some of the stories on the YouTube top 10 were from some new staff and some were from some old staff. So it was really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say not to brag, but to heck with that. Let's brag.
Yeah.
Our small staff is really knocking it out as far as a product.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we got 2 papers a month. They're 8 pages, but they are packed with, as I say in my promo, stuff you need to know and stuff you want to know. And then, of course, the video live wire material is hitting on the big, huge stories like, Huerta and
Yeah,
ICWA.
for sure.
And
Yeah,
then-
we've really expanded our live streaming content this year, and that's a lot of the stories that are on that top 10 for YouTube were live streamed stories. Some of them aren't necessarily live wires like the interviews, but we did live stream the oral arguments for Castro Huerta and the Brackeen versus Holland. And those were really 2 of our biggest live streams this year, and also with community engagement. So while the live stream's going on, people are going into the YouTube chat and having their own discussions and stuff. So that was a real expansion this year on the YouTube.
Now, those aren't what I would say sparkling entertainment, but my God, they're such an important topic. Like we're talking
Yeah.
about the future of our children and whether or not Oklahoma will be forced, if we have to respect our sovereignty a lot more.
Well, you'd think it's not; those aren't like we're talking about just the story aspect of it. But what's interesting to me as the guy behind the switches, it does turn into an entertainment thing because, for instance, with the Holland versus Brackeen case, the oral argument live stream, we had people in there making comments about what the defense or the one side of the argument was, and so they were having another layer of a legal debate from the YouTube chat about who's this and that, and it really got pretty in depth. I was surprised because people were quoting code from the United States code and stuff in the YouTube chat. So it becomes entertainment at a certain point when you incorporate that live chat element on YouTube.
Yeah.
And if you go to our YouTube channel and check out those live streams now, that live chat will play back, and you can watch the engagement there too, even if you weren't there when it was live. So
Right. I love hearing lawyers get caught like that.
yeah,
They're making a ridiculous argument, and somebody said, "Hey, wait a minute.
yeah.
There is a previous situation where that eliminates your argument." This kind of
That's what's really gratifying about serving the audience that we serve. They are very aware. Not everyone in the world is going to be aware of things on that like Supreme Court federal level in terms of law, but when you get into the indigenous population, so much of our everyday life is built around that. And so they are very engaged, and the feedback that you get when you're out there doing this kind of work it's really encouraging, I think, because in a normal newspaper or a normal news broadcast, you would never see let's just run an oral argument at the Supreme Court level. They don't have the time for that. But for the Mvskoke Creek citizens who pay attention to our channel, that's their bread and butter, and they want to know what's going to affect their daily lives. And so they become very engaged, and they are very vocal about their thoughts. And it's really good for us to use that engagement as a guide to producing, the content they need to navigate their world.
Yeah, and those two live streams in particular, Oklahoma v. Castro Huerta oral arguments, which was number 8 on our list, and the Holland versus Brackeen case, which was number 2 on our list of most viewed this year. That's something, it doesn't seem like there's anybody doing that, because doing the live chat part of that, because we pulled in a lot of subscribers from that and new viewers to our channel just from those things where, yes, you can go to the United States Supreme Court's website and you can listen to the audio live from there. That's where we're getting the audio, right? But there's nobody to chat with, if you do it that way. You're just passively listening to it.
Or if you are chatting with people in like their blog posts, you're talking to other people who might not be Indigenous and might not care the way that you care.
Right.
So it's a really connective place for them to discuss these things too amongst their own, community.
So they come onto YouTube and they search that, and our channel comes up, and they are able to go in and have a discussion with other natives. They might not even be, or they probably aren't Mvskoke citizens, because we had some that chat is really interesting, apart from the case part, because, for instance, in that chat for the Holland case, there was a lady who gave all of her private information about where she lived and stuff because she had been adopted, and she got reconnected with somebody who was from her tribe who lived in a different part of the state that she was in, and they had a whole discussion, and this is all happening in the chat while the oral arguments are going on. So it's like it's a whole other layer that you don't get.
It's kind of defining what it is to be Native, and Indian country is a small place.
Let me ask kind of a bigger question, and we'll move on here. What we do here on this show, Mvskoke Radio and our video and our newspaper, is a lot different from what other tribes get. Now, first of all, most other radio stations are public radio stations, so they owe their soul to CPB, Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And you have to play by those public radio rules. Here we do what we want. Our newspaper, I think, is well presented. We've had our graphics folks have been wonderful in making it quite readable. But the content is, as you said earlier, the heavy-duty kind of stuff that we need to know, and then mix it up with some of the fun human interest kind of stuff, and occasionally the hilarious or off-the-wall kind of thing. So I think it sets us apart, one, in our production, and two, the directions we're able to go, particularly after freedom of the press.
Right.
Thoughts there?
Well, I think that it's important to understand the philosophy behind the different mediums that you can consume news in, right? So if you're consuming news from the mass and mainstream area, their main focus and philosophy is to break news. If it bleeds, it leads.
It leads, right. I know that.
We have a whole other layer of responsibility in our writing. We're also, and this is my personal philosophy and something I try to teach people who I work with in the newsroom, is that in addition to informing our audience, our job is also to take a snapshot of this day, this week, this month, this year in history, and preserve it in the archives for people 70 years down the road to understand what was really going on in this space of time. And I think that's something that you find lacking in mainstream. They are not looking at it from an archivist perspective. And when you ask yourself, how does the Indigenous person get written out of history? That's exactly how they get written out. When you're not capturing an accurate and unbiased snapshot of time, then that's how we've been written out of history books. And so that's kind of my personal drive in the work that I've done, is to create the environment where we're looking at it from an archivist philosophy of what will our children and grandchildren need to know about where they're at today. How did we get there? Where did we come from? That's important layers. That it's not always just about the breaking news.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the archival aspect of that, because on our top 10 for the YouTube videos this year, all three, because the festival returned this year, all three of our, in case you missed it, videos from the festival made the top 10, which you would expect. And as every year, the videos that get the most view on our YouTube channel are the festival stomp dance videos. That's just consistent.
Right.
There are a couple other videos that we have that are also, they're almost all of the top 10 most viewed videos of all time on our YouTube channel are also archival type videos, like the Philip Deer video that we have. So I think that's an aspect that you don't see, just like you were saying in the mainstream media, is they may keep an archive of stuff that you could search back to, maybe like when the internet started or something, like there'll be a web page or something about a story that you can Google up from 10 years, 20 years ago. But like any news stories from the 70s, the news station doesn't have that on the internet. Now an individual may have, recorded a VHS tape and put it on YouTube or something like that, but most of our stuff that's very popular, those are the eras that it comes from, the 80s, the 90s, stuff from way back that the department was doing, and we held on to that media and digitized it and then got it on YouTube. So
Okay, well, let me move it on to perhaps another topic. Now, I had mentioned sparks igniting between the tribes, plural, and the governor.
Mm-hmm.
He came out and said, no, the gaming compacts are old, they don't work anymore. You guys don't have control over your roads, your police are toy police, essentially. And other things that were what I think accurately call hostile to tribal interests. We dealt with that topic also, and it just hammer blow that.
So one of the best things about Governor Stitt is that he's inspired me to actively work in elevating the standard of context in journalism, especially here in Oklahoma. And I say he inspired me. Really, when you sit there and watch a governor of your state who supposedly has tribal membership be so condescending and so vile to the indigenous people, you have no other option but to do something in order to make yourself feel better about it. Sitting by and watching that play out in the news headlines, if you think of somebody 70 years from now and they're going to be like, what was that McGirt thing? And they're going to start Googling or whatever method they use 70 years from now to see what that was about. There's a lot of headlines out there that are very lopsided, and they're very I would say incendiary, and they're biased against the tribes. And so that kind of inspired me to start reaching out to other news outlets and saying, look, do you realize how silly you look when you quote him directly, because his information is unfounded and it's wrong and the context isn't there. And one of the things that I'm most proud of in 2022 is our department's role in helping educate those other journalists out there in the world. We participated in the Oklahoma Media Center's collaboration, and that brought some of the state news into our department, and we were able to deliver some of these debates to our viewers. And that had never happened before. And it was all because this governor took this really hateful approach to tribes. And so in order to heal from that, it's like, okay, let's mend this fence between us and the other journalists so they know, so that they're not being fooled. And it's starting to work. We've even participated in some data research that showed the bias in the news, and they've actually delivered a report that helped those news entities better provide context when they're doing indigenous reporting. And that's like a really big feather in the cap of Mvskoke Media for 2022, because that's something very important as we sit in our world today and we see the news headlines about our tribe, our people. What we read every day really impacts how we think of ourselves. And I can tell you that, like, for the first time in my life, I didn't grow up in the era where it was shameful to be indigenous, right? I feel like I've mostly been lucky and people accept me, but this was the first time in this last few years that it was kind of like I felt it personally, that we were being, attacked, and at a huge level. So it kind of makes you go, what can you do to that? And you really start to understand how hard all the journalists who came before you were working to fix that problem too, right? I started really seeing it from that perspective and that overall archive perspective, and it really kind of motivates you in a different way to do the work differently. And then reaching out and being a teacher to those people who don't necessarily know the indigenous perspective and who don't know how to find the context, and so helping train them to do better work. And it's actually, we've demonstrated that it moved the needle a little bit. We've changed that by some, not enough. But
No, but I think it's important to note that if you're actually listening to what's going on, produced by the major news, they're starting to incorporate a lot more Native American source.
yes.
Well,
Yes.
yeah, there's
Yeah, we
been a
heard.
general cultural shift too towards, Native American stuff right now is popular. The Reservation Dogs TV show, just generally in society, it's come up. So, but another thing to point out too, kind of like along the lines of what Angel's talking about, and maybe if the listeners don't know, so our department is funded with revenue that comes into the casinos. So somebody goes to the casino, they have their fun, whatever money, that's where our funding comes from. It's not through taxes or advertising or anything like that. We do have a graphic design department that does banners and things, so there's some money that comes in there, but the bulk of the money comes from that. Whereas the regular Channel 6 and all of the mainstream guys, they've got advertisers that they've got to answer to, and that's part of the reason, in my opinion, that I think we've seen a lot of shift towards them paying attention to these issues, is because culturally you're seeing that people are sympathizing with Native Americans more, and so the advertisers are saying, hey, we want to maintain our market share here, so you guys need to pay attention more to these issues.
I think an important point that maybe we want to include is gaming revenue. What did they say, 52 billion a year come into state coffers? What do they say? Money talks, BS walks.
Right.
And all of a sudden, you saw a major change in attitude once those economics start coming in. Well, let's move on to another story. What's next on your list?
Well, I just kind of wanted to maybe we should hit it off with the top 10 rundown.
Okay, yeah.
Do you want to do the now your results are based off Facebook views, is that correct?
Yeah, I took my analytics off of our social platforms and cross-referenced it with our website to make sure that those digital stories, to see how widely they circulated and to see who liked what and everything. So what I found on our written stories was that the top 10 had just kind of a happy mix of everything. The 10 Okay, so I'm going to start with the 10, and 10 is the lowest, right? And we're going to go up to number 1, which is the highest.
Right.
So number 10 on the list, and this one was only out for a very short time, was the Creek-Friedman civil lawsuit hearing. That one got huge traction. It's a very big topic that people wanted to hear about, and it was about that Friedman case and for Rhonda K. Grayson and Jeffrey Kennedy when they applied for citizenship, and they're claiming they're denied citizenship, and they're appealing that. So that was the 10th most read story. Number 9 was, and this is kind of showing you the depth of our audience, Breaking Generational Curses with Training and Opportunity. The Mvskoke Creek Nation Reintegration Program graduated 57 students from their fiber optic technician program. And then number C, this is a story about innovation, was number 7. The gentleman who created the fishing product, Tiger Jugs. Yeah.
Tiger Jugs.
So he got his fishing thing into Walmart, and so our audience loves hearing about creeks doing wonderful things. And the same with number 6, I think. Lance Gouge released his first single this time on August 23rd, and that saw huge circulation. So our tribes our audience likes to hear about people doing some wonderful things in the world, and they like to hear the news about the policy that affects them. One of the bigger stories, and this came in at 6, it was the most widely read story of 2022 and had completely different tone, was the Can I Pull Your Hair story. A lack of policy and reporting protection fosters a predatory environment in the school district riddled with abuse and allegations. That was Morris School's very hard story to do. It had our newsroom in absolute kind of, hyper focus mode. Everybody was paying attention and dotting every I and crossing every T. That was a big story.
It felt like walking on eggshells.
It really did, but we were so obligated to tell that story because that brave young woman came forward. She was still going to school there when she come and talk to us about this story, and we even had a contract reporter do the work, and it was turned into a multi-part series. But they actually, I think, as a result of the story, could say that policy was being reviewed and looked at, and it led to other parents coming forward with their concerns. So I feel like that's one of the examples where, yes, it's hard and sometimes it's not pleasant, but it's impactful and it lets people have a place to talk, and bring those things forward. But the most read story of 2022 for the Mvskoke News was the pageant returning to in person. I mean,
yes.
75,000 reach.
Oh, boy.
That's like the most reach we've ever had on a story at Mvskoke Media. So 75K, it rounded out the very number one thing. And so people were so happy. And that was a big theme of 2022. Things were returning to in-person. People were visiting.
Okay.
And these recaps are going to be in the paper, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so check that out, guys.
What you got, Jared?
So on YouTube, I'm just going to run through them really quick. Number 10 was the feature video for Lance Gouge. And that video was only uploaded on September 1st. So that's pretty good, 4 months to get enough views to get into the top 10. So keep an eye on him. The decision from Oklahoma versus Castro Huerta was the 9th place, which that was the video that told what the decision from that case was. Number 8 on the list is the oral arguments that we live streamed from Oklahoma versus Castro Huerta. Number 7 is the festival recap video from this year, from 2022. I forgot it's 2023. Let's see. Number 6 was Roll Call, a GOP state superintendent debate. That was a live stream that Mvskoke Media did, and where we collaborated with Non-Doc, the Frontier, and News 9. It's kind of the thing that Angel was talking about earlier. Number 5 was the trial date set in the Creek-Friedman case. So that was another one where that video was uploaded on December 1st, and within that month was able to get enough views to get to number 5. So that's a hot topic. Number 4 was, in case you missed it, the 2022 Festival Parade video. Number 3 was the Reservation Dogs Season 2 premiere that was held at the River Spirit Casino Resort, so no surprise there. Number 2 was the oral arguments in the Holland versus Brackeen case, which is a huge case that affects basically any Native person who would possibly have a child in foster care or anything like that. So, and then the number 1 is, in case you missed it, the 2022 MCN Festival Stomp Dance, as I said earlier, which the number 1 slot isn't really a surprise. That every year, now when we had COVID and there wasn't a festival, those previous years were the number 1. So, but that's pretty consistent.
Well, I'm glad you pointed that out. Now, I guess my next thought here is the kinds of things that we have been covering. We've talked about the heavy duty stuff, but there's an entertainment value that we have always included, which is Stomp Dance.
Right.
Joey Harjo coming in to talk and play. We've had other Native musicians, and then gone to like Native American Day, and one that I really, really enjoyed was talking with Winnie Cooper.
Oh, yeah.
God, what a gorgeous voice.
Yeah, and just a complete kind of upstart on her own, just to come from, like, here's this passion. That's what I love about those stories, those artists who just dig deep and make things happen. Mvskoke audiences love to cheer them on and see them do well in the world.
Right, and we were lucky enough to get her to come into the studio and play a few of those. We have talked with a number of other things. I think, speaking on behalf of this show, I think one of the most listened to, or people went to our YouTube site, were our interviews with the chief. Just took a big list of subjects and just threw questions at.
Yeah.
And of course, when we got to the Friedman topic, we had to do a little dancing there, but in the middle of that section of our interview, our phone lit up.
Oh.
And there was persistent. I mean, people did not want to go, and I have a feeling it was, of course, the Friedman faction. And I was not going to let them on. And I don't mean to be mean, but I engaged the chief for a discussion and not a debate on the Friedman question. Others, of course, have been the musicians and the chance to chat with Joey Harjo and others like that. So I think we've got a lot of bases covered as far as what our department puts out. We've mentioned a wonderful grant that would allow us to expand and breathe a little bit. What do you see coming down in the future? Jared, let's start with you. We only got a couple minutes.
Well, we're going to be doing more live streams, more live wires, and there'll be some stories coming out later this month that'll be pretty interesting for the audience. That's going to be about the department too. So, but we can't do anything about that right now. But there will be stuff in the future, and trying to also maybe incorporate a podcast or something. There's some stuff we're working on in the back end to try to get the kinks worked out. But there'll be more offerings on YouTube and in the future. So,
let me say I appreciate your willingness to lend some of your audio that we've used on this program.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, it's, as I say, it saved my tail a few times, but it also had the chance for me to get a hold of something that I would not have been able to reach on.
Yeah, and I think when we have the stuff set up at the office like we do, the little studio, we can get interviews, that maybe they can't come down to the radio station live,
Sure.
but they could dial in. So.
Okay.
Well, and I just want to, my priorities for this year, 2023, I'm trying desperately to get that place fully staffed. I feel like all of us are tired and need some help, but we have some good applicants coming, and we, like you mentioned, the funding coming in, and it's going to help us tremendously get that staffing up to where it needs to be, and then we get to pursue some creative content, I think, and we'll be making some announcements soon, and then the news will be coming out, and it'll be exciting for Mvskoke Media.
Now, Angel, you have connections with some of our national organizations like Native American Journalists Association and
Yes.
SPJ, Society of Professional Journalists, who is recognizing more Native participation, including yours truly.
Yeah.
But where are we now? Has the picture changed? Are they taking more notice of Native journalism?
I think that the Native journalists themselves are getting really good at marketing themselves, but I don't think the rest of the world is fully accepting that Native journalists are great storytellers, which is ludicrous in my mind because we are the storytellers, right? And I would hesitate to say that it's a total shift of the tide until that time where you see Indigenous journalism mentioned in industry standards, right? I was the first person in 2021, I think we got interviewed by Editor and Publisher magazine. They said it was the first Native person they've interviewed in the industry.
Yeah.
So I think that tide needs to change a bit more before we can say it's totally there.
No, I wouldn't say it's totally, but I think it's significant that they are paying attention.
Yeah, there's a little wave coming, and maybe it'll build up some momentum, and I think that we'll keep riding that wave.
Even the local folks here. Well, where are we here? We're out of time. We want to say thank you to Angel Ellis, our managing director, whip cracker, our boss, and then Jared Moore, our wonderfully talented electronics and video guy who's come in to talk about what we did in the past year. So we want to thank you all for listening. We're going to keep it up, and I want to also thank Morgan Taylor and Kaylia Berry for covering the show during the holidays. Appreciate it. And there's really a lot of talent there that who knows where they may end up, particularly in regards to this program. Anyway, enough of that. Pat and myself and our others on the back, we appreciate you all. 2,000 Madoas, and we'll catch you next week.
Mado.
You've been listening to Mvskoke Radio. Join us again next week for more local, tribal, and community news and updates. Mado.